crisis of your making, and please don't think that because we want a conversation with you about London Bridge that we think that. But I'm conscious that basically transport in London, in South London, is in a state of crisis at the moment, and much of the backwash of the redevelopment of London Bridge and the mismanagement of the services that go into London Bridge is affecting TfL. This morning was yet another day in hell for many South Londoners. You can't see this, but I was at Balham trying to get in alternatively through the tube, and it was completely...
Breaking down train at Norwood Junction, signal failure at London Bridge,
yeah,
I think.
and Crystal Palace was utterly chocker. Huge station. Yeah. So Transport for London services are definitely taking the backwash. Can you and I have had a letter exchange, but do you want to say a little bit to the committee about what TfL is trying to do to pick up the failures of the rail industry and make life a bit easier for the suffering passengers in South London?
Okay. Before I do, I'll just say one thing about the previous part of the session, which is that I hope you enjoy assuming the mental of some of those people, because many of them...
Don't say this, Peter.
There are many really good taxi drivers. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah.
And there's some who aren't.
We've had very good behaviour and taxi drivers today, and it's been a very good discussion. And I think it was very productive. So let's leave that there and pick up the impact of London Bridge services.
I just wanted to say one other thing, which is that I don't think that as a public official, what I don't think is, I think it's absolutely reasonable to answer all those questions in enormous detail, whether or not people like the answers. I think it is entirely unacceptable. I'm so inured to it that I'm not bothered. But I have people who have been abused violently and accused of being fraudulent and taking bribes, and I think that's entirely unacceptable. I'm not suggesting you do it. I'm not suggesting that there are any more than a handful. All I'm remarking, and I want it on the record, is that is unacceptable behaviour, because we ought to be able to discuss those things without being accused of illegal activity and being soundly abused.
Well,
okay, that's
noted.
it.
Right, we're on to London Bridge and the impact on TfL services.
Well, I mean, we have had an exchange about it, and we've done... So we always knew, I suppose the first thing to say is the London Bridge project is huge, and it was always going to be the case that in the various stages of doing the project that there were going to be great constraints on the station and the train services, and that we would have to play our part in dealing with those. And we've played our part, we've played our part in several ways. We've played our part by leading the travel demand management exercise about changing people's journeys. Network Rail and train operating companies have given us some money, but I think without our leadership and without Vernon's leadership we wouldn't have got as much done as we could, and we're continuing to do that. We played our part because it was apparent that people would change their journey patterns, so for a time we were paying special attention to the running of the Jubilee line between London Bridge, Waterloo and Southwark and Bermondsey and indeed Canada Water. And we played our part for a bit, running some extra buses until it was proved that they weren't needed. We're also playing our part because there's quite a lot of diversion onto the East London line, and we've we've built up the number of 5-car trains as quickly as we can. They are now all 5-car on the East London, which has created an extra 25% capacity on the East London line, and the only thing I'd say about that is that some of the regulation of the southern services is actually preventing us from achieving the reliability that we should do on the East London line, which is a real shame. We only just last week got back to 97% on a couple of days, which is the worst we want to be on the East London line, and other days it's been much worse than that because of problems further out on the route to London Bridge. Having said all of that, I mean, clearly there's no aspect of that, of the recent iteration of the phase of that project which has been successful. So after Christmas the station was too crowded. Then when the train service changed, it transpired that through a combination of the unreliability of new equipment, frequent failures both of that, some inadequacies in installation, and more fundamentally it looks like that there's an inability of the infrastructure that's been installed on the southern side to actually operate the train service that has been scheduled, with the result that several trains have been cancelled. So we're doing everything that we can to mitigate that in respect of running decent East London line services. But I think at the heart of it are two things, both of which the committee will be very familiar with. One of them is that actually there is no London focus for either the South Eastern or the Southern train services. They're run as part of a bigger group of services from a longer way away. And I bet there are now some people outside London who were vociferous objectors to us taking over the London part of the South Eastern, who now rather wish we had. And it was quite well, we welcomed what the Chancellor said last Friday with Boris when he said that the government were going to, if the government were re-elected, they were going to look in the next session to devolving more of the rail services in London to the Mayor, because actually that would be one solution. The infrastructure difficulties are not finished yet. I think it's very worrying that actually it might be the case that the planned train service doesn't look as if it's capable of being run on the infrastructure that's been provided. I don't celebrate anybody else's failure because we want Network Rail to succeed as well. But what I think the other thing is that it demonstrates absolutely in spades is that the problem with the National Railway Network is that there isn't any leadership. If that had been my train service, even if it wasn't my railway, we would have been down there at London Bridge. We'd have been down there every morning and every evening, and you know we would have been down there, visible, and at least saying sorry, if not doing something, trying to do something about what it meant. And the truth of it is that there doesn't appear to be a controlling mind. The National Railway appears to be run by endless committees. I am in receipt of the daily performance statistics, morning and evening, for both the Southern and South Eastern at London Bridge, and I read them every day, and they're not good reading. No. If you can get the managing directors of the train companies in here and the chief executive of Network Rail, I'd be interested to know whether they're in receipt of the detail that I'm in, because I think that's the only way you run a decent railway. And I'm not criticising them, because they might be, and I know there are a lot of people working as hard as they can to fix it, but I think it's a terrible thing for passengers in South and South East London. And the other thing I'd say, which I'm quite happy to say here, because I've said it to a number of senior people in the railway industry, if those had been my passengers, I'd have given them 2 or 3 days free travel by now, because they've had a really rough time.
Yeah.
I think, Sir Peter, we did have we had Network Rail in, and I think in hindsight we weren't hard enough on them, because they were trying clearly to fix it. But my observation is that since then we've seen the crisis with Thames Water in the tunnel at Blackfriars, and the institutional fragmentation comes across as a key issue, because Network Rail and the rail operators blame each other, and Network Rail and Thames Water were blaming each other, and there seemed to be a kind of lack of impetus around getting together to resolve problems, and the ownership of the problem has been an issue. And I think we accept what you say, that TfL do try very hard just to tackle issues.
Well, I mean,
sorry.
It is a wider issue, though, because it seems to me the great lesson of the PPP era here is that actually, if it is fragmented, it's very hard for somebody to say, yes, this is all mine, I'm going to do something about it, and I care about the passengers. And actually, the great advantage of the structure we've got now, and what we do even in respect of London Overground, is to say, this is our problem. We are going to fix it. We don't come here and moan about Network Rail's performance with the London Overground, as much as sometimes I'd like to. We go away and fix it, because we think it's our issue to fix.
I think, a personal view, I mean, the committee hasn't consented me to say this, but I think this this is the moment when the institutional failure of that setup becomes most abjectly clear. It's when there's a crisis that is not dealt with, and you know, the Southern Railways in particular, and Network Rail, have let the public down. And for what you have tried to do, Sir Peter, I think we have to say thank you, because you have tried as a body to pick up some of the slack from a crisis which is not of your making. There's awful overcrowding going on at some of your hubs at the moment. Victoria, Canada Water, many of the smaller stations. Is there anything more you can do to try and manage that problem?
Well, sorry, Canada Water in particular, we're really working as hard. That's why I referred to running all the 5-car trains on the East London line, because that itself takes people away better than it used to, and we're working really hard to make sure the Jubilee line works every morning. If we thought it was worth keeping on the supplementary bus service, we would have done, but as a matter of fact it didn't really seem to be doing much. And
that's the only thing I did want to pick up with you, Sir Peter, because you did provide a supplementary bus service running non-stop peak times between Waterloo, London Bridge and Canada Water for a week of the disruption, which you then, it was lightly used, there was no appreciable benefit, and you withdrew it. I just wonder, Sir Peter, whether or not the problem there was people felt that the disruption would go away, that there wasn't enough time for people to get used to the fact that the service was there, it wasn't publicised enough, and actually more people might now be willing to make medium-term changes to their travel plans if they knew there was this alternative way into the area, and whether or not it might be worth experimenting again with a pick-up service like that.
We did actually run it for a few more days, but I mean, it wasn't just lightly used. There was nobody on them at all, because actually the Jubilee line. The Jubilee line hasn't missed a beat in several weeks. And
but it's the interchange that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, partially it's been relieved a bit at Canada Water because of the because of the 5-car trains on the East London line. I mean, I think what I would say is, if it became apparent that we were really not coping again, then we'd have another look at it. But the other problem is, as you know, that actually it's quite slow in the morning peak coming up from Canada Water to Waterloo and London Bridge, and people would rather wait outside. Even if you do shut for a few minutes, they'd rather wait outside and get the Jubilee line than they would drag up on a bus. We are still running, I think, more 47s anyway, and more 381s. I think I'd need to check, but I'm not sure. I mean, people settle down into it. I think that the real agony for me is that if you look at the daily statistics, nearly every train coming into the southeastern side in the morning peak is late, and on Sundays every train leaving on the southern side in the evening peak at 5 o'clock is late, and that's pretty bad, really. And I think what it's also pointing to in the medium term is that actually the way in which the National Railway Service works in London is not the way in which 21st century London works. We've had a bit of that discussion about taxing private hire industries today, but if you look at the National Railway network, this concept of timed trains for a city of 9 million people, where people want to go everywhere all the time, is sort of outdated. It isn't a metro service, it's nothing like it, and they don't have the methodology of operation for a metro service. If you go down and stand at London Bridge in the evening peak and watch the trains going in and out of the station, then compare that with Morden on the Northern line and see what or Elephant and Castle on the Bakerloo line. Elephant and Castle on the Bakerloo line in the peak hours, the train comes in, the driver gets off one end, another driver gets on the other end, and it goes. In Waterloo, for example, on the South Western, the average dwell time of a train in Waterloo station is 17 minutes. Quite often, the train comes in, it's still got a guard, incidentally, I don't do much. The guard and the driver get off, 2 fresh people, different people get on, and it goes out. And we can't live with that anymore. London's a busy place, and I think that's part of what the overground's all about. that's transformed a service that you needed a timetable for into one that you can rely on as being frequent and useful.
Okay, thank you. Can I just pick up something you said earlier on when you were talking about the infrastructure that's being put in at London Bridge? Are you effectively saying it's not fit for purpose?
My understanding is that some of the installation wasn't done properly and had to be corrected. They put in some equipment they've never put anywhere before and found it wouldn't work very well. I believe it's getting better, but I must say, if I was Mark Kahn, I would be pretty bothered, because signal failure at London Bridge, when I do my morning text every morning, seems to come up with monotonous regularity. Yeah. And well, you know, did you ever have Phil Houghton here? I think you did. Yeah. Chief Operator. So he's gone to NR. Yes. I mean, Phil ought to be all over it, because new equipment ought to work. You shouldn't put it in unless it does work. When you have put it in, it should work. I mean, there are still too many failures there.
When we asked them, I think in the private briefing, and we were told basically that the staffing who manage, you know, the control room type staff, manage the trains coming in and out, it's taken longer for them to get used to the new timetable, etc., and it's all run too tightly. They have specifically ruled out there being any problem with the building works or with the equipment, and that, I think, was very clear. But what you're telling us now, Sir Peter, suggests that they're not being entirely honest with us about what's going on down there.
I don't know when you saw them, but my understanding is that there's some signalling or track circuit equipment which is brand new, which is of a new design, which was put in, which didn't work very well, and they've had to find some people who can fix it, and there aren't many of them. And that some of the infrastructure which was put in wasn't working very well to start with, and is getting better. But I would be bothered. I mean, you know yourselves. This is not me saying, yeah, Yardley sucks. You know, aren't we good? Because we've had our own problems with this stuff. Modern railway signalling is fantastically complicated and really difficult. So I would forgive them some of that stuff, because you do put stuff in, and you do test it, and it still fails, and you have to find a way of doing it. Now, I think more fundamentally, what would really worry me is at the moment the inability to run the service in total that was expected to be run on that infrastructure, because that appears to be a real worry, actually. And you will have some unfamiliarity. You know, in today's railway, you can't expect drivers to be intimately familiar on day one with something that change arrangements.
But it was supposed to settle down.
Never seen before, but if this is settling down, it's not very good, is it? Yeah. That's my observation.
No, it's
reading
appalling.
it on a daily basis.
It's absolutely appalling.
But then you would have to, you know, if when, because I'm sure we will, when we get our hands on these London suburban services, I think we would want to take the overground approach to them. The other thing that people might have to get used to is that you can't have trains to everywhere. You know, the underground works by people changing from one frequent service to another frequent service. Part of the problem with these services is this massive multiplicity of destinations. And if you look at Thameslink, which is a criticism of the way it's been franchised, that I'm very happy to put in the public arena, I think when the whole thing's finished, that train service is going to run from King's Lynn to Eastbourne, from Peterborough to all sorts of South Coast destinations. I wouldn't like to run that at a very high frequency through central London. You know, I think that's an implausible suggestion. And actually, Crossrail's going to be quite complex. It's got 3 ends, 2 of which are on the National Railway network, but it doesn't have 17 ends. And if it did, I wouldn't give any chance to it running reliably through central London. And my strong feeling is that Thameslink will have to go on as it does, because the contract's been let. But I bet the next one's Bedford to Gatwick Airport. I bet it don't go to Eastbourne and Brighton and King's Lynn and Knobbledy Nook and Wind in the Willows, because it's just implausible to get all that lot to work properly in central London.
Good interchanges.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the point. And there will be people who don't like that, because I'm sure it's very comfortable to get the train you want from Purley to London Bridge, or Victoria.
Well, it doesn't happen now, so
in a London,
we may as well have something
well,
different.
I mean that's the point, and of course
Right.
people are paying more for it
Sorry,
than they
Chair.
do for our services.
Okay, we've got quite a lot to get through. Steve, you wanted to pick up something on this?
Yes. Well, I really just wanted to, before I move on to the next topic, which is night buses, I wanted to support Val's comments and thank you for your comments. Also, Peter, I mean, the effect on many of my constituents in South London has been horrendous over the last few weeks. And my point of criticism was around modelling. Whoever ran the modelling of this beforehand, I think if you were in charge and someone else in charge, there'd be some hard words to be said, because I think that let down passengers. Would you not agree, Peter, perhaps, with that on the modelling aspect? They were supposed to model this as best they could beforehand.
Yes, and there are some limitations in modelling. I mean, just that I wouldn't either claim we're perfect at it. Some of the traffic schemes you look at, you think you've got it right and you haven't.
Yeah, I get
that. But I mean, it's all a bit public, isn't it? That's the problem. It's not like you're trying it out and you can. I mean, and that bothers me too, because actually, I mean, one of the things we've done, for example, as you've seen with these enhanced train services with new signalling, is to go gently in the upgrade till you get there. Whereas this appeared to be planned to work in total on day one, and we're now on about day 60, and it still doesn't work properly. So
Had no plan B either.
it's the wrong way around. I do sympathise with them a bit. There are an awful lot of people, I suspect, down that, I know I get minutes of endless meetings with loads of people in. I see minutes of them, desperately trying to fix all this lot. But the other thing is, I'm not as brave as people think, but I would have gone down there. You just know, don't you? I don't have to go down every day to know people are having a bad time. Any day on this sheet when there's no train leaving London Bridge on time in the 5 to 6 o'clock hour, people are really going to be pissed off about it. Why wouldn't you turn up and say, do you know what, I'm in charge here, let's do what we can, let's have some free coffee, let's do something useful.
Great.
And I think, and Dave Ward, to give him credit, he was on the telly the first week of January. He's one of the Network Rail people. Dave looked harassed, and I'm sure he was. He works very hard, but nobody's been there since, have they?
I think you're absolutely right. I think they've got more. They came to us, we spoke to them, didn't we? But I think we didn't, as Val said, give them perhaps a hard time.
I think we all thought it was about to get better.
As perhaps we should.
Yeah.
But I think that's a fair point. If I can move on to my
I've got OnConnect next, actually. It's OnConnect next on ticket officers.
Oh, sorry, you missed
You're
it.
jumping
I'm so
ahead.
enthused
No?
about night buses.
Right. Let's